Nearly half the US cosmetics contain this toxic chemical. Most men and women don't know this, but the average female, before she even leaves the house in the morning, she puts on over 160 different chemicals. Can you believe that? And the average male puts on, well, over 80. And this is a huge detriment to your overall health, and that's why we're talking about it today. So let's break this down, but before we do, I'm Dr. Nick Zarowski. Welcome to the channel. Be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I also want to mention, before I get started too, we just opened up enrollment on my one-on-one health consulting program. It's called NutriCore, and this is a system of care where we do a deep dive into your health. We use lab data in order to address the health concerns that you're facing so that you can overcome them. Now, the thing that is really important about this is that we do all of this naturally. We work on promoting longevity so that you can avoid disease in your future and have good health for a lifetime. So, we want to help you improve your health and do it naturally. So if this is something that you're interested in, I'm going to put a link below. You can click on that and you can schedule a call with a wellness advisor to determine if this type of care is right for you. All right, let's go ahead and dive into this because this is wildly important. Cosmetics and personal care products have often been tested for toxic chemicals. Now, a new study conducted by researchers at the University of Notre Dame have found that more than half of the common U.S. cosmetics tested contain high levels of industrial compounds associated with various health conditions, including cancer. Now, this is something that I have talked about for years. Now, I don't know, how long you in particular have been following the work that I do, but talking about toxicity and talking about detox is nothing new. I've talked about this stuff since day one of my career because I think it's so important. I've had run-ins with toxicity issues. Many of my patients have had serious run-ins. And so we take this issue seriously. And one of the things that we know is that the beauty products that people use are horrible. I mean, I'm talking about the average person, not you, of course, but the average person out there who doesn't know any better, using some pretty nasty stuff. One chemical found in an alarming number of products from popular stores such as Target, Ulta, Sephora, Bed Bath & Beyond was fluorine, which is part of the alphabet soup known as perfluorinated chemicals, historically abbreviated as PFCs. Now, these perfluorinated chemicals include perfluorocarbons and per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, collectively known as PFAS, but also referred to as PFOA and PFOS. Now, these chemicals are, they're these big long words, complicated to talk about, complicated to say, and then they're abbreviated in a million different ways. But here's the thing that you have to know. They're dangerous. You don't want them on you, and we're going to talk more about that in just a second. These PFAS are sometimes referred to as Teflon chemicals or forever chemicals since they do not break down in the environment. And this is something I talk about all the time because these chemicals are literally incapable of just breaking down in nature. So you just get a bioaccumulation of them in your body and you get an accumulation of them in your surroundings because, like I said, they don't break down in nature. They're very dangerous. They're used by manufacturers to make products water, oil, grease, and stain resistant. They are also found in the firefighting foam. According to the National Institute of the Environmental Health Sciences, there are more than 4,700 PFAS chemicals in existence, and the number continues to rise as the industry invents new forms. Prompted by pressure from the Food and Drug Administration, DuPont 3M voluntarily phased out 2 of the thousands of PFAS chemicals, PFOS. Okay, here's the thing about this, is that what these companies do is that the FDA, they put a little pressure on them, and then after that, they go in and they phase out the one. But here's the thing. All they do is make a derivative of it, and they just use it under a different name, and literally it's the same problem. So it's like sometimes we think, oh yeah, we're fighting, these chemicals and all these toxicity issues, and we're making good ground on it. No, we're not. And even when you hear the government talk about green energy and all this stuff, it's just a load of garbage. It's all political talking points because at the end of the day, they are after things like fossil fuels and problems like that. But the fact is that most of these companies are producing enormous amounts of chemicals. They're covering crops with chemicals. There's chemicals in every direction that you look, and they just turn a blind eye to whatever industry that they feel like that they just don't want to go after. I mean, simply because of lobbying and everything else. So don't think that the government's actually trying to clean things up. They don't care. It's just all political talking points. Now, um, while these two chemicals are no longer manufactured in the United States, documentation from the FDA reveals that phased out doesn't necessarily mean that they're not being used anywhere. In fact, there are limited ongoing uses of PFOS, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency says although the chemicals are no longer manufactured in the United States, it basically doesn't mean that they're not being used in other places. And basically what can happen is, though they're not using it in the United States, you can go and have them used all around the world, and then these products are imported. So it's talking about carpet, leather, apparel, textiles, paper, packaging, coatings, rubbers, and plastics. They literally all can have this chemical on them, be imported in the United States, and it's considered to be fine. So obviously you're just trading one problem for another, and these companies certainly don't care. It's all in the name of profit. Forever chemicals found in nearly half of the cosmetics tested. Okay, so let's talk about the actual cosmetics and what they found. To assess this potential environmental burden, the PFAS in makeup, researchers from the university purchased 231 products in 8 categories commonly purchased throughout the United States and Canada. The categories included lip, eye, face, and eyebrow products, and foundation, mascaras, and concealers. They went to stores in Indiana and Michigan and tested them for they tested these products for fluorine. Basically, what they found is 56% of the foundations and eye products had chemicals in it, fluorine, and also 48% of the lip products and 47% of the mascaras. Many of the products that were tested positive were also labeled long-lasting and wear-resistant. And that's one of the problems, is like some of these things, it's like, oh, it's great because it just stays on forever. Well, there's a reason for that. And quite frankly, putting these different chemicals like around your face, around your eyes, is very dangerous, because I mean, this stuff gets into your eyes. It can then travel, like, I mean, it has firsthand access to your brain at that point. So very dangerous problem here. So let's go ahead and talk about the food packaging and drinking water, because this is important too, because there's a lot of contamination issues here. Now, unfortunately, one common belief is that if a product is released on the market and sold to the public, that it must be safe. In 2020, 33 scientists signed a consensus statement to plead with lawmakers to take swift action to reduce exposure to plastics in food packaging. In it, they included 1,200 peer-reviewed studies to support their statement. One of those plastics is PFAS that we just keep talking about here, and know how dangerous it is. Nearly 10 years ago, there were 6,000 authorized chemicals that could be used in food packaging. Jan Monk of the Food Packaging Forum and one of the consensus statement contributors states that the latest number is nearly 12,000. Can you believe that? 12,000 different chemicals. So that's why, like, even when you look at plastic and it's like, many people get all wrapped up in the BPA. Is it BPA free? You have to understand that is one chemical. There's a million other chemicals in there that are very dangerous that nobody's talking about. So at this point, the BPA thing is laughable, because it's like, oh, it doesn't have that in it, but we didn't even look to see about any of the other chemicals. We really weren't concerned about that. Now, the other thing that is frightening, and this is important because I recently was working with a patient and they were very concerned because we did this toxicity test and we determined that they had a lot of heavy metal toxicity, and they kept asking, where did these toxins come from? Where did they come from? And they expected me to be able to pinpoint an exact place in their life that they came from, but it's so difficult when you look at toxicity issues as to where they came from, because a lot of them are given to you right at birth. Now, the article goes on to say frightening levels of forever chemicals are found in breast milk. In one study published in the Environmental Science and Technology, researchers analyzed PFAS in a group of breastfeeding women in the United States. The data were gathered from a cross-section section of socioeconomically and geographically diverse groups of women, and yet showed PFAS contamination in all samples. This is crazy. So it's not like, oh, well, you know, these people in this region, or they're a little bit poorer and these people have bad practices. It wasn't like that. It was like they just tested everybody across the board and they found it in all samples. The samples showed levels ranging from 50 parts per trillion to more than 1,850 parts per trillion in women's breast milk. Even though there were no set standards for breast milk yet, as a comparison, the Environmental Working Group advises a target for drinking water of 1 part per million. Okay, let's back up here. 1 part per million in your drinking water, and they were finding 1,850 parts per trillion in women's breast milk, and that was going to a baby. Okay, and you have to understand, you're talking about a very delicate immune system, you're talking about a delicate nervous system, and we wonder where so many different problems are coming from today. So the so they advise so the Environmental Working Group advises a target for drinking water should be 1 part per trillion, and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry recommends 14 parts per trillion for PFOS components, a component of PFAS in children's drinking water. Okay, so basically what we're looking at here is that there's chemicals in everything, okay? And so what we have to do is we always have to do the best we can to avoid them. I mean, by all means, we certainly have to be going and drinking purified water, okay? Like in my clinic, like we actually go to a water filtration center that literally that's all they do, and we get the water from there. In my house, we have a multiple stage filter that like works on getting everything out, because that's the thing that we have to realize too, is that there's so many toxins out there that like literally aren't even on the radar. Like a lot of these companies are like, yeah, we take out arsenic, we take out fluoride, we take out, you know, this chemical that comes from agriculture. But the fact is that there's so many chemicals that aren't even on the radar. So we just have to do the best we can and make sure that we're using good systems to have good pure drinking water. And also we have to make sure that, like, you know, especially protecting the children, if you have children, that's very high on your list of things to do, because I mean, between the clothes that we wear, which are covered in flame retardants, and, you know, the mattresses and the pillows, I mean, I'm talking, there's just chemicals everywhere. So first we do the best we can to protect ourselves. And the next thing from there is that you can focus on detoxing. Okay, I talk about detoxing all the time. It's literally one of the things I started my career on, is helping people detox. And I can tell you that when people detox, it really can be the biggest life changer ever. When somebody comes to me and they have just a million different symptoms, and it's like, oh my gosh, I just don't even know where to start with this person. We can't tackle all these problems. We just start with the detox, because it's the like biggest broad net that we can throw down in order to help scoop up most of the symptoms that they're having and get rid of them. And it's just because we're literally upgrading whole bodily health. And so if you want to learn more about detox, I'll put a link in the description below. And hope you enjoyed this video, and put in the comments below what you think about all this, because I think that this is a huge problem of our time. Most people aren't paying attention to it. Most people think that the government is actually going to stand up, like the FDA is going to stand up and actually do something for you, and they are not. So be sure to be diligent about this. Remember, your health is your responsibility. The government doesn't care about your health. Your insurance company doesn't care about your health, and most people are just in it for the money. So be sure to be taking action at every step, and you're going to thank yourself down the road.